We're going to start right now. Welcome everyone to the Kent Mill Synagogue and Young Israel Shomrei Emunah Kristallnacht commemoration program featuring Ruth Zimbler. I am honored to be part of this committee and be running such important programs. It is our goal to have survivors who were there at the time to tell their stories, and we are fortunate to have found Ruth Zimbler, who will be our featured speaker tonight. A couple of housekeeping details. If anyone is interested in closed captioning or not interested, there is a button on your screen and you can either exit to turn it off or turn it on through your feature on your computer. I think if you go to more and go to subtitles, but closed captioning is available, and we'd like to thank Lori and Vital Signs LLC for providing the closed captioning. I'd like to thank Jason Mintz for all of his technical support, Debbie Katz, and the whole Holocaust Committee. I'd also like to give specific thanks to Joanna Aruda of the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City, who is in charge of the Speakers Bureau and has really facilitated everything tonight with Ruth. Right now, I would like to introduce Rabbi Weinberg to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you to the Holocaust Committee for all the important work that you do throughout the year and specifically putting together this program. Thank you to all of you for being here tonight in this virtual space to participate alongside us. And most of all, thank you, Mrs. Zimbler, for being here with us. And we're very eager to hear your words. It's you that we want to hear tonight, but I'm just going to share a very, very quick thought just to frame the evening, the observance of Kristallnacht, and hopefully your story as well. This past Shabbos, we read about Parshas Noach. We read about the story of the flood. And in the aftermath of the flood, Hashem comes to Noach and he says, "Tsei min ha-teva," leave the teva, leave the ark. I've always found that pasuk to be quite surprising, very surprising phrase. Why did Noach need to be told to leave the ark? Why did Noach almost need to be coaxed, it seems, to leave the teva and to enter into the world? Wouldn't you have thought that after so long cramped in the quarters of the teva with great difficulty and the animals and the family and the rocking of the boat, he would have been eager to leave, especially as he was entering a world where things were growing again, the sun was shining, the waters were receding, it was a beautiful world to enter, and perhaps not such a pleasant environment in the teva. You would have thought he would be rushing to leave the teva. And yet, if Hashem had to come to him and say, "Tsei min ha-teva," leave the teva, get out of there, it means that he was hesitant in some way. And that's exactly what the Mefarshim, the commentators, explain. They explain that after Noach had experienced the intense, horrific destruction of the flood, the destruction of the entirety of the world, after he had experienced such horrible trauma, Noach was hesitant to re-enter life. He was hesitant to live. He was hesitant to re-engage with the world and the normal parameters of life. He was afraid and hesitant to go back to the way things were beforehand because of what he had experienced. Noach was the quintessential survivor of incredible trauma, incredible atrocity. And it's understandable why he would be hesitant to re-engage with life. What I find absolutely remarkable, truthfully, I find inexplicable and even miraculous, is how survivors in our time, survivors of Kristallnacht, survivors of the Shoah, got up and decided courageously to re-engage with the world, to re-engage with life, and to live again. And I feel so incredibly fortunate and thankful that so many of them did make that important decision, because we are the beneficiaries of an amazing world, an amazing Jewish world that they worked hard to build and to create despite everything that they had experienced. And I feel so fortunate that they did so, because not only are we the beneficiaries of this incredible world, but we also are able to learn so much from the way they lived, from how they lived, from what they did, for what they fought for. And we can be eternally grateful to them for that, and hopefully continue to be inspired by their stories and to learn from them long into the future, and Emir Hashem, be able to celebrate wonderful times and wonderful accomplishments together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi. As you may know, on November 9th and 10th of 1938, Nazi leaders unleashed a series of pogroms against the Jewish population in Germany and the recently acquired territories. This event came to be called Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, because of the shattered glass that littered the streets after the vandalism and destruction of Jewish-owned businesses, synagogues, and homes. Ruth Mannschein Zimbler was born in Vienna, Austria in 1928. Several months after the German annexation of Austria, Ruth and her brother Walter watched the destruction of the largest synagogue in Vienna from their apartment on November 10th, 1938, during Kristallnacht. Concerned about their children's safety, Ruth's parents sent Ruth and her brother on the first kinder transport out of Vienna. Here is Ruth to tell her story. You have to unmute her, Abigail. Wait 1 second, she's muted.
There. Good evening, everyone. As you heard, I was born in 1928. So when Hitler marched into Austria, I was exactly 10 years old. You saw a picture of my class, my
Slide, please, Jason.
up on the screen. Have you got it up on the screen? There we go. And I'm the one on the left side seated with an unusual blouse, a dark checkered blouse. Do you see that? And it's my third grade class, and it's the last time that I had a normal school life in Vienna, because several months later, as I said, Hitler marched into Austria on March 12th, 1938. Now I'm going to give you some dates. I don't expect you to remember them, but I wanted to see how close together everything was and how things changed from day to day. A few days after March 12th, my mother and I went to the library with 2 books. I'd taken out 2 books every 2 weeks and returned them and gotten 2 others. And this time, the librarian refused to give me books. And I said to her, why are you refusing to give me books? I haven't done anything to them. I didn't tear pages. I didn't scribble in the margins. And she said, you can't have books because you're a Jew. I said, I was a Jew 2 weeks ago. You gave me books. Don't ask questions. You're not getting any books. Go home. That stung, and it still stings when I talk about it. And that was my first realization that things are going to change. The next thing that happened was to my mother. You know, it's 1938. There's no refrigeration. So a housewife who ran a household used to go shopping every morning for fresh vegetables and fruit as it came in from the markets. And of course, from the farmers. But of course, the farmers also didn't have any refrigeration. So there was the stuff, and it was sold out as quickly as possible. Jewish women were no longer allowed to go shopping in the morning. They had to wait till after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And by that time, you know, everything was limp. And you had to do the best you could. And then what happened to my father was an episode that there are many books write about, and that is what was called a scrubbing party. You know, just before Hitler moved into Austria, we had an election campaign for the Austrian government. And since there was no television or cell phones or whatever, they used washable paint and they wrote the election slogans and the names of everyone um, in the gutters of the streets. And so Hitler wanted that removed. So they went into the very affluent neighborhoods where you had bankers and doctors and lawyers and well-educated Jews. And they gave them a pail of hot soapy water and a scrub brush. And they made them get on their hands and knees and wash that paint off, scrub that paint
I
off.
think they're saying you're frozen.
And it was,
Wait, Ruth, wait a second. They said you're frozen.
yes,
I think you're about
are we all right? And make them scrub. And you know, my father works for the Jewish community and in the social services department. And he used to go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, come home for lunch, and then go back after a couple of hours. And my mother was waiting for him at the window, and he was late, and she was scared to death because they used to pick up Jewish men in the street and just send them off to the concentration camps. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is the synagogue. It's the largest synagogue in Vienna. It has 2,442 seats, and it has 2 ladies' galleries. And as you can see, beautiful stained glass windows. I live in the building to the left, which you can see with the white gate. And I live on the ground floor, directly facing the synagogue. Only it was part of the part of the complex. There were 2 of them. You see a little bit of the one on the right, which is identical to the one on the left. But I was in the left one. And between us was simply a strip, which was the courtyard between us. And I could see everything that was going on in the synagogue always. And of course, we attended all the functions and all of the services. We had a Hebrew school on the 3rd floor in my building. So we were very closely associated. My father also had a talent. He mostly worked with people who were coming through from other places, like Poland and Czechoslovakia and different parts maybe of Germany. And he would help them fill out the impossible, complicated documents that they needed to leave the country. And of course, every other day you changed something. If you did one thing, they made you do another thing. And Papa was very, very well versed in that sort of stuff. Very few people were, certainly not the ones who wanted to get out. They really didn't know how to do this, and he did, and it saved his life. Anyway, so there we go. And again, the dates, the next thing that happened to me, which was traumatic for me, was that they told me I couldn't come to school anymore, and that was in May. So they had set aside a school, which was through two bus rides away from the house, and it took over an hour to get each way. And my mother and father said, you know, enough already. And he enrolled me in a Jewish yeshiva type school. That was only one bus ride away from home. And I finished a year there. And then, you know, we used to go away, my mother and my brother and I. and perhaps a friend of Mama's with children. We used to go to the country for 6 weeks every year, every summer. And I remember all of the ones before, but I couldn't remember where we were this particular one. I guess I'm suppressing it in some way or another. Anyway, we came back and we were there, and I started in September to go back to the school. My brother was 4 years younger, so he wasn't in school yet. Anyway, it gets to be November, and as you know, the young Herschel Greenspan killed a German, very small royalty, or actually wasn't even royalty. He was an employee at the Paris embassy, German embassy, and Herschel's parents had been deported, and he was trying to get in touch with them, and they were very uncooperative. So he went back the second day and he shot von Raab. And von Raab was going to die. There was no doubt about that. There was a mortal wound. And Hitler said, okay, they kill one of ours, we'll kill 1,000 of theirs. And he actually had been waiting for an opportunity to have a real big pogrom, and this was it. So in our building, as you saw it, there were 4 other tenants, and it was dawn. It was still dark up, and everybody was in our apartment, and everything was quiet because I didn't want my brother and me to hear what was going on. And it was very scary because you could tell they were frightened. And finally, when it got to, when sunup came, the caretaker of the synagogue was not Jewish, and he lived in the other building, like the twin building. And he came in and he said, Mrs. Monshine, take the kids out of here. So my mother packed a little bag and she took us out to the Vienna woods where an aunt of my father's lived. She was in her 70s, and they figured she'd be safe. You know, they wouldn't do anything to an old lady. And so she left us there, and she came back into town. But what happened there was we were there for a few hours, and then one of these big beer-bellied Nazis came into her apartment and told her to get out. It was no longer her apartment. It was hers, his. And she said, I can't, I have to take care of the children. Don't give a damn about the children, you dirty Jewish pig. Get out, it's my apartment. So what could she do but pack us up and take us back home? So this is the scene that we found. We came to our house and we had a German seal on our door, and it says, do not enter, and entry forbidden, with the German seal and swastika and the whole bit. So what do? We walk out in the street, and it was a short block. Most of it was taken up with the synagogue complex and our houses. And the whole street was full of firefighting equipment. And the firefighters were standing next to the equipment. And the synagogue is on fire. And the fire is burning through the roof. And they're standing doing absolutely nothing. So Tante went over to one of them and she said, we can't get into the house. Where are their parents? He said, oh, their parents must have been deported. you'll have to do something with them. Why aren't you putting out the fire, said she. And they said, because we were told not to touch anything unless it starts to burn the neighboring houses. And so there we stood. The beautiful stained glass windows were all broken and the glass was underfoot. You know how it feels when you step on glass? I feel that every day of my life because that's what we were stepping on. Well, there were some friends that lived across the street in a regular apartment house. They lived up on the 4th floor and they motioned us up. So we went there and they fed us and they put us to bed and we went to sleep. Tanja wanted to go right back to her place, but they wouldn't let her. But the next morning, by the time we woke up, she'd already gone back. And miracles, they let her back into the apartment and told her that the apartment was hers and that Nazi had absolutely no business to tell her to get out. And we were looking out the window and we saw my mother walking in the same clothes she had on when she'd left us and looking around. We called her up and she came up and she was so surprised to see us because she thought we were safe out there. And she told us that when she got back into the city, the apartment was off limits already. And she was looking for my father. And we had a housekeeper named Maria, and she wasn't there either. And my mother didn't know what to do. She slept at one of our friends, acquaintances down the street. But the superintendent of that building told her to have one more night, and then she had to go, or he was going to report her to the police. So here she was, didn't know where my father was, had no idea. We didn't find him. The telephone is in the apartment, and you can't get into the apartment, and there are no cell phones. These are regular phones. So we found out, they found each other. How, I don't remember. I don't know. I don't think I ever knew. And he told her that they came for him and they came for Maria and they took them to a central police station and they questioned Maria and they let her go. Of course, she was not Jewish. And they took him to concentration camp, to Dachau, which was the first concentration camp. But after 36 hours, the Nazis came and took him out and told him to go to work. Because at that time, Hitler still wanted the Jews out of Vienna and they wanted to make it what they called Judenrein, clean of Jews. And they needed Papa to do the work on the documents that I told you that nobody really knew how to do except him. And so they brought him back to his office and he slept in his office and they brought him food. They didn't let him stop working for a minute. And it took us 10 days before we got the apartment back. And with a lot of influence from friends and from people high up, they finally let us back. Now, I have to describe the door to you. The door it was a big oak door, very tall, and it had 4 panels. And one of the panels at the bottom was knocked out, and some skinny guy must have gotten in there, and they cleared out the apartment of everything. Everything that was not nailed down came out, including a bird cage with 2 canaries. And Mama was happy about that because at least they kept those birds alive. But bedding, clothing, Judaica, silver things, jewelry, you name it, it was gone. So we came here, it's winter, you know, it's the 20th of November, and it's cold. Vienna is cold. And we, with the help of friends and with money, we got some of the stuff that didn't get it back. We bought new. And we finally went, you know, to bed and had our own place back. And I went back to school, and I came home one Friday afternoon, and it was December 9th. So it was just a couple of weeks after. And my mother was sick in bed. She had strep throat, and she had some friends there, and everybody had brought her boxes of chocolate. And I came home from school, and I said, "What is this? It's nobody's birthday this week, next week, or last week." And Mama said, "Well, it's because I was sick, but they left the chocolates." And then finally, I said, "Oh, you know, that doesn't sound so right." And she finally admitted that the next day, Saturday night after the Shabbat, that Walter and I were going to Holland on the first kinder transport. And I said, "I'm not going. I'm not leaving you and Papa here. I will not go." And then, of course, my mother was one of those that you didn't say no to. If Mama said, you did, and that was it. So anyway, we packed the bag for each of us and took the essentials, you know. And there wasn't even a little toy or anything that we loved. We just packed. And when we were about to leave, my aunt, my father's brother's wife, took us to the railroad station because Papa was already there, because he was taking care of documents to let us kids out. We were 400 children. And I think probably most of you know the story of Kinder Transport, which this Quaker lady prevailed on a friend of hers who was in the House of Lords, and she convinced him to bring it before the House of Lords, to bring children to England, because they couldn't save the whole family. At least they could save the children. And they expected this thing to be over in the shortest possible time, so that they could be reunited with their parents, who expected it to become the most evil of all times. So there she took us, and you know, the outside of the synagogue was still standing. And the next slide, please. This is the inside of the synagogue. By the way, I told you there were 2 ladies' gallows, and it was magnificent, absolutely gorgeous. Next slide, please. And this is what happened to it. Now, the building with the arched windows, that's my building. But I didn't see this anymore. When I was leaving, the outside of the synagogue was still standing, and the brick walls were still up, but everything inside was burned out, and there was nothing left inside. And then afterwards, they just junked it, if you will. And so she said, "Kiss the walls, because you'll never see this again." Well, up to then, I'd been pretty stoic, and I did what I was told to do. Not happily, but I did it. And then when she said that to me, that you'll never see it again, I lost it. And I really, really started to sob and to cry. And Walter was 7 and I was 10 and a half, not quite 11. And because it was December and I was going to be 11 in February. And he said to me, Luigi, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to have to start to cry too. And that's not good. So I stopped crying because I didn't want him to cry as well. So we went to the station. We said goodbye to Papa before we got on the train. And Papa said, I'll see you in 6 weeks. And that became the mantra in the letters. And he was very good about writing, wrote once or twice a week. He always said, see you in 6 weeks. Well, it got to be 6 weeks and 6 weeks and 6 weeks. And finally, after about 3 times 6 weeks, I said, Papa, tell me the truth. What is going on and when are we going to see each other again? And he said, sweetheart, I don't know. I really don't know. But we went to Holland because they took about 100 kids and 300 of the 400 went to England. They got off the train at the Hook of Holland and got on a ferry which went to Harwich, England, and they either were going right to a family or they're going to an institution. We went to an institution. Next slide, please. And this is the building we went to. This is in The Hague. In The Hague. This was in The Hague, and it was a school that was no longer in use, so they had converted us to us for a period of quarantine because they didn't know what our medical records were, because many of us did not come from big communities where they had medical records. And so we all got shots from the beginning that you get from babyhood on to whatever age we were. And we had dormitories and we had some dining room and the rooms for teaching and so on. And we were there for 6 weeks in isolation. But at the same time, they tried to show us some of the things that were Dutch and keep us occupied. Next slide, please. This is where they moved us to after 6 weeks. This is a building that was built in the 1600s, and it had several uses, but the people who owned it went to Indonesia to farm, and they left this to the government. Now, the only thing that was different from what you see here, see those 3 windows on top? There was a big yellow wooden slide that came out of there. It was actually fire slide, but we had no toys or anything, so it was our entertainment. We used to take a piece of carpet and we'd sit 3 across and we'd go sliding and we'd go running around the back, come back up and do it again. And that was our entertainment, and it was really, really beautiful. We had teachers coming out to us, and we had a Mr. Van Loon who came in his wooden shoes and his pipe, his corncob pipe every day. And he taught us how to plant things. And each one of us had a piece of ground and we grew different things that were easy to grow, and he showed us how to do that. And we were in this place from January 1939 until the end of August of 1939. And at the end of August, we moved into the city, also a beautiful, beautiful house. In the meantime, they tried to keep up with our studies, math, science, and English. They taught us English. And because we were too far away to go to a public school. Next slide, please. It's one of my favorite pictures. Austria is a landlocked country, got lots of lakes, but we had no seashore. And here is the North Sea, and they took us, who were part of this house, and took us to the North Sea, and it was so impressive. I had never seen a big body of water like that, and with a never-ending horizon. And I am in front of the nurse on the right, and Walter is the littlest one, and a nurse on the left. And the rest of the kids are from different places, particularly the ones in the background. The older girls, we were from 18 months to 17 years, and the older ones were 16 or 17 years old. And it's one of my favorite pictures. Anyway, next slide, please. The next, we'll hold that one for a little while. Anyway, so there we were until August 1939. My father had applied for an American visa the day after Hitler marched into Vienna, into Austria, and had to wait, of course, so long, and had to get someone in the United States to vouch for us that we would not become a burden to the government, that there would be somebody to take care of the family in case he couldn't do so. And what happened was we were supposed to go back to Vienna to be examined by the American embassy doctor to make sure we were all healthy. And that was supposed to be on the 5th of September. Well, you know what happened the 1st of September. War broke out and Hitler invaded Poland. And so the Dutch people who had been taking care of us and the committees said, we're not sending the kids back to a war zone. Forget it. So everything stood still. But what happened was we moved into town and we started to go to school. At least I did. Walter didn't get. And again, it was a Friday afternoon, and I came home from school, and they were whispering about the Munchine kids. And I said, what's going on? Where is it? Where are we? And they said, tomorrow you go to America. I said, I'm not going to America. That's even further away from my parents, and I will not go. And they said, yes, you're going to go. And again, I had to follow suit. What was I, a kid? And Walter and I were picked up the following morning, Saturday morning, and we were taken first to the German embassy to get those passports. Will you put that slide back on, please? And I'll show you that passport here. You see the red J and the one on the lower right? Yeah, well, you know that stands for Jew. And you see it's also signed Ruth Sarah Munshine. Every Jewish woman had to add Sarah to her passport, and every Jewish man had to add Israel to his passport. And then once we got the passport, they took us to the American embassy, and the doctor passed us there, and we got a green card. And then he took us to the ship in Rotterdam, which was this port city. And in Rotterdam, we had found the ship, which was also called Rotterdam, was the old Rotterdam. Then there was a new one after that. And I was sure, though nobody had said it, I was sure that my parents were going to be there. And of course they weren't, and I was deeply disappointed. But I got on the ship with Walter, and there were some friends of my mother's on there. What had happened was my mother had told them, put this on the ship, and they said, don't be ridiculous. And I told you, my mother was one you didn't say no to. She called them every couple of hours for 2 days until they said, we got to get rid of this crazy woman. And they decided to put us on board the ship. When I woke up the next morning, Sunday morning, I was already seasick. And that's the way it remained for the rest of the trip, which was 10 days. A couple of days, well, the next day, actually, there was a terrific storm in the English Channel. And the English Channel was heavily mined against the Germans because they didn't want the Germans to get to England. And the sky was yellow and the sea was yellow and the ship was going like a toy. It was being tossed from side to side. I was sure I was going to die. So I went into the library and I wrote a letter to my parents and I told them, I'm going to die. I'll meet you in heaven. Bye-bye, take care. Of course, it didn't happen because I'm still here. And I never did send that letter. But what we did lose a part of the screw, and it took us 3 extra days to get here. So we left October 16th, and we got to New York on October 26th. All the way over here, I was seasick. And we each, I don't know where we got it from, whether it was an organization or an individual. Each one of us got $2.40 boarding money. And that was money in those days because you could buy 3 rolls for a nickel. So that was money. But I sent a telegram to my parents right away that we were on board ship. And I also had to pay for mineral water, which was not part of the deal. And it was the only thing I could keep down. So I had mineral water every day and I spent the $2.40, but I held on to Walter's $2.40, didn't spend those. Anyway, so we came to New York, and when I saw the Statue of Liberty, I got instantly well. And at the ship, my mother's aunt, whom none of us knew, picked us up. And she had a pea green Pontiac, was a big car. And here I was sitting like a princess on the back seat with my brother in that pea green car. I never saw a pea green car in my life before. Had been brown and black and maybe navy blue. And so there I was in America. And this time, my father's 6 weeks came true. it really only was 3. And on November 17th, my mother and my father arrived in the United States. This Aunt Faye took me to the ship to meet them. They came on an Italian ship, was one of the last ones that became, before it became a troop ship. And it came and in Genoa, where they had gotten on the ship, the stevedores blackmailed everybody, and they wouldn't put stuff aboard unless they were bribed. And my father really gave them the last cent he had, because the Nazis didn't let him out with a lot of money, a certain amount of his pension. I think it was 10%. And there were big pieces that were made for us. And then so in order to get them on board, he gave them the rest and didn't have a penny in his hand. And he felt terrible because he always taking care of everybody. And so I gave him the $2.40, and he was feeling like a millionaire. And there we were in America, and fell instantly in love with it. So here we are. What I usually do when I have classes of kids from the 6th grade on, I leave them with a message. And that message is support one another. If you see an injustice, do something. Don't be a bystander, be an upstander. Support one another. If you hear bad words, because words hurt, support one another. If you see physical abuse and injustice, because you are our future and you can change the world. And I'm telling you, if you have any young people there, you are our future and you can change the world. And I'm ready for questions. Yes, Lisa?
She's saying 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Lisa's here, so I'll do it. It's Debbie Katz. Not sure where she is. Okay. We actually had one question, Mrs. Zimbler. Thank you so much, first of all, for an amazing and interesting talk that I think all of us can immediately relate to. The way you told it, we were there with you at every step of the way. The question that we have here is, what street was your synagogue on? Do you have the, do you know?
Yes, the street was called Tempelgasse because it was a street of the synagogue, the temple.
Mhm.
And you know, there's a play by Tom Stoppard that just came to the United States from a big run in England, and it's called Leopoldstadt. And Leopoldstadt was the Jewish section in Vienna. And I was brought up in Leopoldstadt. So that I've got tickets to the play because it just spoke to me when I saw that, when I saw the ad for it. The synagogue was called the Leopoldstädter Temple, but the name of the street was Tempelgasse. And it was off Praterstrasse, which was the big street.
And is there a synagogue there today, or what's in that spot?
Well, you know, there were 2 parts to the synagogue. One was what we call the Kleiner Temple, the little synagogue, which had daily prayers. And there were about 100 seats in there. So that is still there because it's in the building that I lived in. And then there was a passage to the big synagogue where there were the bigger weddings and concerts and things of that sort. Jewish Congress met there one year that I remember first time I saw a Black person who was an Ethiopian Jew. And it was an active synagogue, very active.
Okay, here there are a couple other questions. What did your father do for a living when he came to America?
Well, my father had been trained as an engineer, as a mechanical engineer. And during the Depression, he was working on locomotives. They didn't need locomotives. So that's when he got the job at the Jewish community. And so when he came to America with the lack of language you know, that he couldn't get into a different category, he started to work on iron doors, night shift, $23 a week. And then since it was very close to 1940, because they came in November 39, 1940, we already went on a war production basis because we were doing the Lend-Lease with England. And so he got a job with a company called Circle Wire and Cable that's in Massachusetts, Long Island, still in business, I think. And he was one of their fixers, you know, whenever a machine went off, he would fix it. And when they no longer could get parts because of the war effort, he would make them. So that's where he worked the rest of his life.
Okay, that's very interesting. Did you ever go back to see your home in Vienna?
I've been back several times. Once I went back with Sylvia, my daughter, and my daughter-in-law, Deborah. And that was in the 90s. We went, the door was open to our apartment and we went in, and I'm crying because, you know, it was very emotional. And Sylvia's taking pictures, and we were, and I said, this is this, and this is this, this is it. And we're walking through, and I said, where's the kitchen? What happened to the kitchen? And we looked, and it was a school, and it was a really religious school. And Sylvia said, look, that's such an accommodating. It is a school that couldn't be more orthodox, and that's what it is. That Hitler tried, but he couldn't. So that was a real great experience because it was such a joy to see it being used the way it was. And then I was back while I was going on a cruise, and they stopped in Vienna, and I saw it a couple of times. But you know what? I have no love for the country. I have no love, no attraction to the country. It means nothing to me. This is my home, and it will always be.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, so that seems to be the end of our questions. I'm going to First of all, I'm
So
gonna thank you very
if
much.
we have a couple of minutes, Lisa had heard something that she thought was interesting. And if we can do that, can we, Lisa? Have we got about 2 minutes?
We have about 2 minutes, but before you tell the story, I would just like to thank Abigail Appel, who so generously
Yes.
took of her volunteer time. Abigail, poke your face in, please, to help Ruth with all of the technical aspects. So I just wanted to
She's
say
been
thank you.
absolutely marvelous. I never could have done it without her. I'm serious.
So
I
now
couldn't
Ruth has a
do it
really
without her.
amazing story to end with, and I'd like to thank you all for coming. You're on, Ruth.
Okay. A few days after Hitler took over in Austria, a knock came on the door in the afternoon after I was home from school, and I was with my best friend. She came. She left soon after because she was American. Her father was in America. And so knock came on the door, and this guy in civilian clothing, but with a one of those long black leather coats, came to the door. We were with our housekeeper, Marie. And Marie was as big as a minute. She was like 4'11" and maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. And so, and had a deep, deep voice. She smoked like crazy. And she had this deep voice. And she said, "What do you want?" And he said he wants the key to the library. Now, we had the Jewish Theological Seminary above us. It was the one that trained rabbis for all of the state of Austria. And we had a library that was priceless because there had been Jews in Vienna for 400 years. And there were manuscripts from the top thinkers and the top rabbis in that library, handwritten scripts and so on. And so he asked for the keys to the library, and she had to give it to him. He had identification. He was up there for a couple of hours. He came down, he asked to see the children. So she brought him into the room where we were playing. And then my brother didn't look Jewish at all. He had blue eyes and blonde hair, blonde curly hair. Patted him on the head, chucked him on the chin, asked us questions. Sylvia my friend didn't like what she was seeing. And she felt it more than I did. I didn't pay that much attention to him. And she started to cry. And Marie pulled herself up to her full height and a deep voice. And she said, "You're frightening the children, get out." And she took the keys back, and he said, "I'm taking certain things with me, and the rest they'll come for tomorrow." And sure enough, the next day he came with trucks, and they cleaned out the library. And you know what they did to the books. They burned everything except for what he took. So fast forward to, this is 1938. Fast forward 1961, and they catch Eichmann in Argentina, and stories are on the front page of the Times, everything. And I look and I said, "Oh my God, that's the guy." And I had never known who it was until I saw his picture, because that I will never forget. And sure enough, that had been Eichmann, and he had taken the best of the best. And the reason they sent him is, you know, he was quite brilliant. He read Hebrew, so he took the best of the best. And they were going to do a museum in Prague, as a matter of fact, which would show that there had been such a tribe as the Jews, but they were gone, but this is what they produced. So that was my touch with Eichmann. And it's very unusual because that hasn't happened to too many people. And it's a story I reserve for when we have a little extra time. That's it.
Thank you so much. I
You're
hope you
so
see the
welcome.
audience
It's
clapping
been a
for
pleasure.
you.
What's
You're-
that?
I hope you see the audience clapping for you.
I do, and I appreciate it so much. And just be happy, be healthy, and just don't forget, and don't let anybody forget, please. Because only with education will we be able to overcome this latest spate of anti-Semitism, and we will be able to keep up our principles and our feelings for our religion. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.